This is a message from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were ever going to get any money back. And then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. All so you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now this is Taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees.
Over the past 75 years, more than 10,000 chemicals have entered our food supply, but the EU allows just 300 additives. At Thrive Market, we prioritize quality, banning over 1,000 ingredients found in conventional grocery stores. Our Healthy Swap scanner helps you find better versions of your pantry essentials without the junk, dyes, or fillers, and everything is delivered right to your doorstep. So shop at a grocery store that actually cares about your health at thrivemarket.com/get started for 30% off your first order and a free $60 gift.
It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
I'm Clyde Lewis, and this is Ground Zero. The numbers to call tonight, 503-225-0860. That's 503-225-0860. The case of INSLAW, the case of the PROMIS software, that was just a small portion of what Danny Casolaro was on to. He believed that he uncovered a sprawling criminal network. He said it was made up of U.S. officials, organized crime members, and intelligence agents. He called it the Octopus. But here's the thing. How many times have we heard these stories about people who have entered into a world they don't belong in? And what they're doing is they're investigating some pedophile ring, some drug ring or something, and then we hear about them dying mysteriously. Whether it be a suicide, a hanging, or something. We hear this all the time on the internet. I don't know how many of those stories are true. Some of the well-known people we've heard committed suicide after they found out the truth, or they were either killed after they found out the truth. And so here we have a group of people, or at least in Casolaro's case, he didn't belong. And those around him were lying to him. Those around him were manipulating him. They were cheating. These guys were involved in murder. They were involved with dealing drugs, dealing arms, sex trades. And Danny Casolaro thought that he was onto something huge, and he probably was. He got close. But he got burned. Like Icarus getting too close to the sun. He burned. A week before he died, Danny told his brother Tony that he'd been receiving death threats. When Danny arrived in Martinsburg, he had all these notes. He had all these documents 2 days before he died. And he was scheduled to meet several informants and complete his investigation. He believed one of his new contacts would deliver key evidence about finances of the Octopus, wondering where the money was coming from. It was an IRS agent, from what I understand. Somebody from the IRS computer data center was going to give him hard copy printouts about IRS information and filings by these groups. And the day before he died, Danny met with William Turner, a former employee of a major defense contractor. And according to Turner, he gave Danny papers showing the corruption that Danny believed was tied to the Octopus. But within 24 hours, Danny Casolaro was found dead. And there was no sign of Turner's documents or Danny's research papers to this day. Not one of those papers has been found. When West Virginia authorities wanted to open up the case, we wanted to do a formal investigation of his death, they ordered an autopsy. And what happened is his brother, Anthony Casolaro, said that the assistant medical examiner told him, the state of West Virginia, said, we've embalmed the body, and so an autopsy is going to make it a little difficult. They embalmed the body without permission from the family. But then there was an autopsy. They said that Danny had bled to death from the razor cuts on his wrists. It revealed that Danny wasn't alone in his hotel room, obviously. They described a lot of other things that point to the idea that Danny was murdered. When Casolera's hotel room was cleaned by a professional cleaning crew the day after his death, important evidence was destroyed. One of the housekeepers saw 2 bloody towels in the bathroom minutes after Danny's body was found. It looked like they were trying to wipe up the blood from the bathroom floor. The scene was handled poorly by the authorities. Someone, I'm sure on the inside, was involved with screwing up all the evidence. But there was evidence, scanned evidence he was murdered. So there should be more of an investigation into what happened. But the best we can do is Christian and Zachary's new Netflix series, The Octopus Murders. Been watching that and really have enjoyed it. One of the things, though, that I was looking at during the break, I was re-looking at the suicide note, the alleged suicide note of Danny Casolera. On the bedroom desk, I mean, there was no notes left behind. It was an investigation, nothing. But they found on this desk, there was an empty composition notebook. There was a legal pad. A page was ripped out of it. There was a pen where a message was written on the legal pad. And it said this. This is what the suicide note said. To those who I love the most, please forgive me for the worst possible thing I could have done. Most of all, I'm sorry to my son. I know deep down inside that God will let me in. Now, think of those words for a moment. Think of those words. To those I love the most, please forgive me for the worst possible thing I could have done. I could have done. The worst possible thing I could have done. Most of all, I'm sorry to my son. I know deep down inside that God will let me in. That note, the way it's written, is him telling you that he was murdered. That someone forced him to write that suicide note. Please forgive me for the worst possible thing I could have done. Meaning that he didn't do it. I know deep down inside that God will let me in, meaning that he didn't kill himself, because if he did, God probably wouldn't let him in. I don't know what his belief systems were, but a lot of people believe that if you commit suicide, you don't enter the kingdom of heaven. So he knew deep down inside that God would let him in, because he knew that he wasn't killing himself, that someone was killing him. And it could have been the worst thing he ever did, but he didn't do it. And maybe he did quite possibly had feelings because he felt let down. He felt like that he was being manipulated. He felt like he was taken from place to place, and he was dealing with some of the most destructive individuals on the planet. And as I've said before, many of these investigators, they just have to, they're the ones that, they're like soul eaters. You know, the ones that go in and try to eat these demonic souls from bodies. They're taking in all of this doom. They're taking in they're sponging up all of the dread in their investigations, learning about the drug trafficking, learning about the human trafficking, learning about the weapons that are being supplied to countries and the money that's being laundered. Things haven't changed all that much, have they? Money being laundered, weapons being sent out to countries that are full of corrupt individuals. Yes, happening all over again, isn't it? 503-225-0860. That's 503-225-0860. Stay tuned. We have another guest. Ed Opperman is coming up on Ground Zero, and we'll be right back with more. Don't go away. second hour, we have a special guest, Ed Opperman. He's the president of Opperman Investigations and Digital Forensic Consulting. He hosts the radio show, The Opperman Report, exploring many eclectic topics such as conspiracy theories, scandals, and politics. Ed's career as a PI has taken him down some rough roads, working on litigation against Trump, Epstein, and Charlie Sheen. His investigations have involved Hunter Biden's laptop, Wienergate, and Todd and Sarah Palin. Welcome to the show, Ed Opperman. Hey, Ed, what's up?
Hey, Clyde, how you been?
I've been pretty good. I hope you've been okay. Are you all right?
I'm doing good, yeah.
That's good to hear. So, Danny Casolaro, tonight, definitely some dark vibes when you talk about this case. A lot of people in my chat room saying tonight they're feeling the vibe. Watching the Netflix special also creates a very dark vibe. Why is it so important that we know about Danny Casolaro?
Well, you talk about dark vibe, okay? I just recently interviewed William Hamilton, who's the president of INSLAW and the creator of the PROMIS software. I did 3 hours with him. He hasn't done an interview in 45 years. First interview he ever did on the radio. And you were talking before about William Turner, right? Mm-hmm. I got in front of me an affidavit, a handwritten affidavit by William Turner that Mr. Hamilton gave to me. And it's attached to an email where Hamilton is telling me about, we question whether or not Casolaro would have been murdered, right? But we know for a fact that there was a murder of a man named Alan Standorf, okay, who worked for NSA. Hamilton believes he gave some documents to Danny Casolaro from the main core political blackmail version of PROMIS, okay? Shortly after that, January 1991, Mr. Standoff is found dead in a parking lot at the airport, stuffed in the back seat of his car, beaten to death, okay? So we know that murder exists. There's no that wasn't a suicide. He didn't beat himself to death in a suicide. We know that's a murder, okay? Right. Now, Hamilton goes on to say, because Hamilton, by the way, was an NSA agent himself. He worked for the NSA for 7 years, okay? Yeah. Now, he goes on to say, as an employee of the NSA, there's no way that our government could not have investigated that murder and come to a conclusion of who did that murder. They wanted to send a message.
Well, they said one loud and clear, definitely. But see, the thing that gets me about the Danny Casolaro case is it's now it's a typical thing for people to say, well, you got a little too close for comfort, somebody wiped him out. But this was something that was very new, especially when Casolaro felt that he was going to break open one of the biggest cases of his career, and it killed him. And it revealed a lot of things about weapons and money laundering and drugs and all of these things that we now know fill the coffers of our government. And I think the American people should be aware of this is where a lot of the money comes from to keep these people in office.
Right. And something very important for the audience to know is Hamilton explained to me that besides there being a backdoor in the PROMIS software where you could spy on foreign governments, they were using this in banking too. Mm-hmm. So the NSA and these gangsters involved in all this had access to wire transfers to Swiss bank accounts. So they were spying on politicians and seeing their corruption and using that to blackmail them.
Mm-hmm. Which is something that we've learned about with these what we call dossier strategies, which someone had told me the Clintons are famous for. That's why when they talked about the Steele dossier and all these other crazy things that have been going on, you wonder about the dossier strategy, that they have almost all of these, skeletons in the closet of these politicians, and that's what keeps them from doing the right thing. They always have to do the wrong thing because somebody will blackmail them.
Oh, that appears to be very obvious, yeah. And the way I came into contact with Hamilton was through a fellow who wrote a book about Robert Maxwell, who was also involved in all this PROMIS software and selling it overseas and laundering the money.
Wow. Who do you think, and I asked this question before, I'm going to ask it again, do you know or do you have a theory as to who may be the head of the Octopus?
No, I do not. My whole end of this thing is my contact with William Hamilton. That's my end of this. I'm no expert on the Octopus whatsoever. I did shows about the Octopus years ago with Ted Rubenstein, who worked for Dave Emery and Mae Brussels and worked at the Flint publications. I did some shows with him. But so a lot of this stuff I saw on Netflix was brand new. But the idea in the last episode of this Netflix documentary where they try and smear Bill Hamilton, say like he was that he didn't have the savvy or the experience to know when he's dealing with an intelligence agency or not, or being fooled into thinking that he's getting information from a bowling alley, that kind of stuff. Okay, I can tell you that Bill Hamilton knows his stuff, and his attorney was Elliot Richardson, who was the Secretary of Defense. He was the Attorney General of the United States of America. He's not a fool.
Wasn't he involved with Watergate, or wasn't he part of the Watergate?
The Saturday Night Massacre. That's Elliot Richardson. Yeah.
That's the thing, is there's just like, again, we go back to the idea of these tentacles that Casolaro talked about. So many damn tentacles touching every scandal from JFK on, even Watergate, and having all these connections, E. Howard Hunt, George H.W. Bush. See, this is the thing. I've always felt that the head of the Octopus has been George H.W. Bush.
I mean, very possible, yeah.
He just seems like the guy. He's the slimy guy. Everything that he was involved with, he didn't know where he was when he was in Texas, when Kennedy was shot. He was CIA. They told him, they told Reagan not to put him in as his vice president. Put him in as vice president. And after inauguration, just months after inauguration, we find our president being shot, just like Kennedy was shot. And you're thinking to yourself, man, there are patterns here that you cannot ignore.
Well, October surprise, too, which also would be Bush, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so Danny Casolaro had talked about October surprise. Did that really reveal that perhaps there was a deal made so that the hostages would be freed when Reagan got the presidency?
Yeah, that's what the theory behind the October surprise is, yeah. And there seems to be a lot of confirmation of that, too, as well. Hey, but do you know that Joe Biden's involved in this?
No, I didn't.
Okay, this is what I'm talking about. Okay, yeah. William Hamilton sent me a letter that Elliot Richardson sent to Joe Biden when he was the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, right? This is incredible. And he outlines all this stuff about how the investigator for the Judiciary Committee, this fellow named Ron LeGrand, did all this and gave Hamilton and Elliot Richardson all this information, right? So they send a letter over to Joe Biden. There comes a return letter to Richardson, right? From LeGrand, supposedly. Dear Mr. Richardson, Senator Biden received your letter and asked me to respond, right? And he goes on to say, hey, there's a conflict of interest. We really don't investigate this kind of things. There's a separation of church, of the branches of government, all this kind of stuff, right? It turns out LeGrand never wrote this letter. They forged his name on this return letter. Oh. So Richardson sends a letter to Biden. A letter comes back from LeGrand, supposedly, but it's a forgery. LeGrand gets fired, and they run him out of town. There's a lot more to this story than Netflix. There's a lot more here. Okay.
That's just the point, right? It's like, and that's the thing that frustrated me about the series too. I was watching and I was thinking, I feel more manipulated than Casolaro. I think more manipulated than Christian. I mean, Christian seemed to be at his wit's end towards the end.
Yeah, I think he was a little over his head, and so does Hamilton. Hamilton left this project because he felt that Hansen was over his head, and I agree. And not to disrespect the guy, God bless him, go out and do some great work, great, But just some things I see, I think he's over his head. And there's just so much more here. And if you had any idea, because like I said, Hamilton hadn't done an interview in 45 years. So when me and him are talking, and he's sending me these documents, and I'm asking him, hey, man, can I publish this? Can I post this? And he's saying, well, I don't want to get killed.
Ooh.
Okay, man.
And we got more to come right here on Ground Zero, the Danny Casolaro story. Seems we're going to get more out of Ed Opperman tonight. A lot, I'm sure. Stay here. 503-225-0860. Back with more. Don't go away.
Where is my mind? Where is my mind? Where is my mind? Way out in the water, see it swimming.
SRN News. I'm Patricia Stevens. U.S. Capitol Police say they arrested a Gold Star father for yelling at the president during his State of the Union address Thursday night. The man's son was a Marine, killed along with 12 other service members in a suicide attack during the botched withdrawal from Afghanistan in 2021. Travis County is the latest Central Texas county to declare a disaster ahead of next month's total solar eclipse. Officials in Austin say the declaration will help them deal with large crowds, heavy traffic, and strains on first responders. Private property owners in unincorporated areas will also be required to notify officials if they plan to have a gathering of more than 50 people to watch the eclipse. It will happen on April 8th. The Texas Hill Country will be one of the prime viewing locations in the U.S. This is SRN News.
I'm not gonna shoot myself.
Straight away. Take him out, got him ready.
It's my gun.
Yeah. It's a real touchy suicide note, too. All overwhelmed with guilt about your mistakes. Quit your struggle. This thing works. It's not the first time we've used it. Brutally assassinated.
A lot of people that reported on there are dead.
All three of them had been shot in the head.
Brutally assassinated.
We knew who was involved. No one was ever brought to justice.
We found the body. There was a wire running from around his neck to his ankles.
It's no wonder so much conspiracy surrounding his sudden death.
Brutally assassinated.
There is mystery around this and suspicion.
Even when I've told him it's brief, he's dead.
If this thing reaches as deep and goes as high as we think it does, these men will do anything not to be exposed.
What if nothing is like what it seems? Everything you think you know is just a game. A game of wars and lies, cover-ups and disinformation. Secret operations that never took place. Are all pawns in the way of simulation. Every system has weakness. Join me. It's time to learn the truth.
Ed Opperman with us tonight on Ground Zero, president of Opperman Investigations and Digital Forensic Consulting. He has his own radio show called The Opperman Report. We have him tonight. He's making all sorts of crazy connections now that I don't even know about from Danny Casolaro and from the Octopus murders. All right, you're on a roll, Ed. You were talking about Joe Biden and his connection. Any other connections I need to be aware of that I didn't know about and not in my conspiracy history books?
Yeah, I got to go for you. Lockheed Martin. Okay.
Okay.
I'm talking to Hamilton, and he says, yeah, you know, they started, he gets a message one time or a phone call and says, you know what, Lockheed Martin owes you a lot of money. They're using your software, too. They were using it in some kind of way as defense from missiles, you know, to avoid missile attack or whatever. But it was installed in every Lockheed Martin fighter jet. So this is like across the board, this software. But the main use of it, though, was blackmail material.
Mm-hmm.
And the foreign bank accounts.
Right.
You don't hear any of that stuff on Netflix.
Yeah, and I think it's because it was a safety measure they didn't want to do. We were just talking earlier about that. BCCI, that ring a bell? When they were at Cabazon, the Indian reservations, they were working on, I don't know, secret weapons, biological weapons. Did
you ever see that document which mentions Bill Weld, the fellow who ran for on the Libertarian Party? He ran against Clinton back in 2016.
No.
He ran for president against Clinton on the Libertarian Party 2016. And there's a document that describes him. He was being tasked with selling the software all over the Middle East and then laundering the money through Credit Suisse. Walk it through the bank like you did last time. Wow. And you can find that when I got that from Ted Rubenstein years ago. And when
Okay, so are we seeing a repeat performance now? Because my God, I mean, you're looking at you're hearing all these rumors about human trafficking. that are happening now. I don't know who you could attribute it to. You can attribute it to the mob. You can attribute it to the triad, whoever. We know that Southeast Asia is a place for not only the opium trade, but for also the sex trade. We know that a lot of the money, some of the money, we don't necessarily know where it comes from, but it's like I said earlier, it's like, Satan writes the checks and they can cash them. And if they go through the bank, it's okay. And what I'm talking about here is I'm talking about the drug money, the weapons money, the money laundering with the weapons. And we're seeing this happening again, I believe, with Ukraine.
Very true. Yeah, one of the most corrupt joints in the whole world, right? Ukraine. Can't get more corrupt than that. I've had Lev Parnas on my show a couple of times. I've been talking to him. He was involved in all that stuff. He was Rudy's partner, and he was the guy who arranged the phone call between Trump and Zelensky, the perfect phone call. He was sitting there at the dinner table when he made that call.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I wish I knew what that call was about, because they got all angry about that call, but then now we have such a great relationship with Volodymyr Zelensky. And that's the thing is, I don't know if you noticed this, but I did. Just before we were falling in love head over heels with Zelensky and his crew, the Guardian and several other newspapers all over the world were talking about just how corrupt Ukraine was and how they're not to be trusted. And then lo and behold, good morning, Putin decides to get all pissy and start firing his weapons, and we're in love with these guys. And we're handing them money, and we're handing them weapons, and a lot of their oligarchs are getting nice palaces to live in. And now we're paying a lot of money for just macaroni and cheese. I mean, come on. How are the American people not figuring this out, that our government is back to what it was doing during Castellero's investigation, that is money laundering, human trafficking, and drug running and gun running. And it's making them money, and we're not getting any of it.
Well, back to doing it, I don't think we've ever even slowed down, Do you?
Yeah, well, I would agree, but it's not as obvious as it's been with this administration.
It's just a matter of whose pockets it's going to, but I don't think it's even slowed down a bit, yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I would agree that, we do make deals. Deals are made under the table with all the deals that we see going on, and many of them, we just let go because we're used to this. We're used to our government being corrupt. But then when it's just blatant and they do these types of things and you're like shaking your head going, this doesn't make any sense. We are living in clown world. And you're asking yourself, how is it that we're part of clown world and no one's noticing it? It's almost like we're blinded. And then people like you and others talk about Castellero and what he discovered and what we knew and how we know that there is a shadow government. The shadow government has been run by the deep state, and it's not something that was made up during Trump's term. It's always been there,
Well, Peter Del Scott coined the phrase a deep state. But the thing is, one thing I learned from Hamilton, he says, Ed, both sides of the aisle are equally corrupt. And they were both equally evil to him, both Democrats and Republicans.
Right.
And something I learned from Lev Parnas was just fascinating, is that the way that Hunter Biden got that job over there at Burisnov, he got that job through the fellow in Ukraine who books Rudy Giuliani's speaking gigs over there. Okay, so once again, like this kind of corruption, man, crosses both sides of the aisle, man.
It's to us. And that's why, people say, so who are you going to vote for? Nobody. Yeah. Why? Because, you always ask for the lesser of two evils. Well, evil is evil. It's like Alien versus Predator. Whoever wins, we lose. It doesn't make any sense to me why we are so forgiving in an election year when we're still seeing the corruption and the nonsense going on. I mean, last night, come on, what was that? What was Biden on? You want to name the drug he was on? Can you figure that out? I don't know.
Honestly, I couldn't even understand what he was saying for the first.
Like, yelling at me, I felt like I was standing on his lawn. Yeah. And then at the end, I'm like going, he's got to be on drugs. He's got to be on something.
But then the other one in her kitchen was no better, though, man.
What's that? Oh, no. I'm going to take the time away from making cookies to talk with you tonight.
Oh, my God.
We live in such a clown world. It is just I just step back and I'm saying to myself, back 30 years ago when I did this, I was crazy Clyde. Yeah. Now I'm pop culture Clyde. It's like I'm all in the pop culture, and this is the world we live in. Either I am living through a self-fulfilling prophecy, or I'm insane, or something's going down where I want to share in this insanity with other people. That's exactly how I feel about this. Ed Opperman with us tonight on Ground Zero. Give us a call. I'd love to hear from you tonight. 503-225-0860. That's 503-225-0860. We'll be back. Ed Opperman with us tonight on Ground Zero. The numbers to call, 503-225-0860. I don't know, Ed, if you heard me talk about the suicide note and how the way it's written doesn't sound like he committed suicide. Did you get that when you read it? I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm reading into it.
Very possible, yeah. And just the idea of being, forced to write your own suicide note, it's just traumatizing.
Right. I mean, forgive me for the worst possible thing I could have done.
Yeah.
Meaning that he could have committed suicide, but he didn't. Or I know deep down inside that God will let me in. Meaning that he doesn't feel guilty at all, that he knows God's going to let him in because he was doing what he wanted to do. He did what he could. He tried to expose all this stuff, and he meant well, but then he realized he reached the end of the road. I mean, the Netflix special, the Octopus murders, actually, I think I just think that, like you said, they did a disservice to Hamilton, but I also felt that they shouldn't have been so heavy-handed with the idea that Danny Casolaro was broke. He may have found that this lead was nothing and that he just gave up and committed suicide. I mean, that's something to consider, but it just seems like they were hitting it home over and over again like that, and I just figured, well, what about the other evidence that shows that he he didn't commit suicide? And why have they not reopened or at least tried to investigate? Is it a cold case or is it been shut down?
I'm pretty sure it's shut down, but the thing is, just imagine Danny's brother, who cooperated with this endeavor here, and because I know nobody got an advanced screening of this thing, okay? Hamilton never got an advanced screening. It would have been nice if they would have given him an opportunity to say, hey, this is what we're going to accuse you of at the end. By the way, they make this whole spectacle about how this woman got her information from the bowling alley, and Mr. Hamilton was confused. He thought her husband was CIA. Well, during a break, I'm shuffling through some documents here that Hamilton was worried was going to get us both killed, okay? And it's here about two affidavits from Gordon Thomas about Rafi Eitan, who was Mossad's deputy director for about 20 years, okay? And he talks about how Robert Maxwell sold $500 million worth of PROMIS software, okay? And then he goes on to say how they sent this information. He had a mutual friend that was friends with CIA Director George Tenet. They sent this information to Tenet, and Tenet was agreed, the CIA will settle our part of this with you, Mr. INSLAW, Mr. Hamilton. We're going to pay you what we owe you, okay? But then he backed out because the CIA counsel told him, no, we can't do it. So the idea that Mr. Hamilton was confused of who was CIA and who wasn't CIA, he's dealing with the director of the CIA.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm sorry, man. I get pissed off. He's a good man. He stuck his neck out, and he shouldn't be dismissed.
Well, like I said, the whole special, it got to a point where I was getting frustrated. Before, it was a sick feeling of what happened to Casolaro. Yeah. Then when I saw the special on Netflix, I felt frustration more than anything else, bad vibes and frustration. And I just was wondering if I was the only one who felt that frustration, because it just seemed to me that at the end, when they could have been more focused and more, on the edge here, we go back to, we go back to Riconosciuto. He's freaking out, yelling at them on the phone, saying people are dying, and they're freaking out. And then
well, no kidding, man. The guy's been in prison 17 years. Of course he's going to be wound a bit too tight. But that's where you get someone with a little bit of savvy and a little bit of experience to pick him up at the prison. You should be driving that car yourself, or have one of your guys driving that car. You should have a destination planned out, plus a backup destination. All this stuff got to be planned out in advance. It's not, let's hop in a car and go get Danny around. Give me a break, man.
I know. It was frustrating and entertaining and interesting.
Well, it was entertaining, yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting. I'm going to go to the phones. Let's go to Woody in Pennsylvania. Go ahead. You're on Ground Zero.
Yeah, hi, Clyde. How are you?
Good. Go ahead.
Yeah, this might be a little bit off topic, but I was just wondering how the Clintons fit into all this and how they have gotten away, with the Clintons' death list that they have, and we have Epstein, and we have, starting with like Vince Foster and those kids in Arkansas, and how they keep getting away with everything.
Does this Octopus, Ed, Tentacles, does it move into the MENA situation in the Clintons and the Arkansas conspiracy?
I'm not aware of MENA. Of course, it probably is. But definitely Vince Foster. And I was speaking to one of the guys I consulted with before I did the interviews with Hamilton was Hugh Turley, who was an expert on Vince Foster, and his report was added into the Star report. Okay, it's there in the record. So yeah, there's definitely a Vince Foster connection. I forget exactly what it is at the moment. Yeah, Foster was involved with selling this stuff too. Foster's name was as counsel on one of these companies that was selling his software. That's what it was.
There you go. There's your connection, Woody.
Oh, okay. One more thing, real quick.
Sure.
How do they pull off these suicides? Like the one was the Washington Madam. Now, she was on with Alex Jones, and she says, "No way am I suicidal," and then she commits suicide. Now, how do they pull that off? What are the mechanics? Does the CIA actually do it? Do they hire people? And do they just, like, there's never, like, a witness. Do they just get rid of all witnesses? I just don't see how they pull this stuff off like that and never getting caught, like in the act or somebody seeing them out a window or something. You know what I'm saying?
You got really good people that are good at cleaning up messes, I think.
Well, you only need a couple of dirty cops, a couple of high-level dirty cops that will tell all the first responders there, hey, man, this is a story. This is what we're putting out. And they fall into line.
Right, exactly. That's how. I mean, they can hire anybody. And you never know. Maybe they're maybe they're good at it. They're good at killing. They're good at cleaning up, and that's something they do. Let's go to Chris in New York. Hi, Chris. You're on with Ed Opperman.
I have two broad questions. One is, it seems like the Octopus is pulling their tricks off at global proportions, and I just don't see how there's enough personnel to do that. My second question is, you mentioned, for example, Credit Suisse participating in the money laundering. Isn't someone that's doing that, even though they might get a nice little cut, really taking a chance that they have to keep their mouths shut permanently or else?
Well, not only that, but if these NSA guys have access to this Swiss banking account information, they can go in there and steal that money. You're holding that over their heads, too. And you said, how do they have the manpower to do this? The National Security Agency is the largest employer of the state of Maryland. Okay, they got like 60,000 parking spaces in their facility. You know, they got plenty of guys out there, all different DIA and the CIA and the NSA, all these, the FBI. They got all tons of guys. Plus the guys who retire and still working under contract afterwards.
There you go. Thank you. Thank you for calling. Ed, thank you for being on the program tonight. It was very informative. I'm glad we called you up to be a part of this, because it's not every day you talk to somebody. You talked with Hamilton and got in there and was able to talk with him and to get real close to the case. I invite everybody to watch the Netflix show to get an idea of what they have to say about it. And Ed, where do we find you and how do we listen to you?
Just Google Opperman Report, OppermanReport.com. I got 3 hours exclusive with Hamilton. You know, it's gold. Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna try and find it. That'll be great.
I'll send it to you.
Thank you again. Thank you. Thank you again for being on the program, and we'll see you soon. Thank you so much. By the way, guys, tonight it is on Beyond Zero coming up. Stay with us. It'll be on groundzero.radio. That's groundzero.radio. Remember, keep your money.